A projectile slams into a radar installation on the northern coast. Not a drill, not a rumor. Iran's own state broadcaster, IRGC, confirms it within the hour, citing the Hormozgan governor's office directly. The target, coastal surveillance equipment tied to the very systems Iran uses to track and threaten commercial tankers moving through the Strait of Hormuz. This is signal number one. And if you think this is just another skirmish in a war that's dragged on since February, you're missing what's actually happening here. Qeshm isn't a random island, it's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' primary denial hub, the military lock on 1/5 of the world's oil supply. And someone just tried to pick that lock. Again, here's what nobody is telling you about this moment. 3 American service members are dead, 2 of them stationed in Jordan, 1 in northern Iraq, killed over a single brutal weekend. The Pentagon confirmed it Monday, and President Trump, the same day from his Truth Social account, did not mince words. Every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over. He said he delivered that directive personally to every leader in the military. Within hours, CENTCOM launched a new wave of strikes, hitting Iranian command centers, air defense sites, missile and drone launch positions, and communications networks across the country in a 3-hour barrage. Iranian officials say at least 50 people are dead from this month's strikes alone, more than 500 wounded. The overall American death toll in this war has now climbed to 17. That's not speculation. That's what CENTCOM itself posted in real time on social media for the world to see. Now rewind 4 months. February 28th, Operation Midnight Hammer, sometimes called Operation Epic Fury inside the Pentagon. The United States and Israel struck Iran's nuclear program directly. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in those strikes. Not a general, not a proxy commander. The supreme leader himself. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, quietly ascended to the role. And here's the detail almost nobody is reporting correctly. Mojtaba was conspicuously absent from his own father's funeral procession. Weeks of mourning ceremonies, and the new, supreme leader stayed hidden. Ask yourself why a man doesn't show up to bury his father in public. That's not protocol. That's fear of assassination, of instability, of a regime that isn't sure who's actually in charge. A ceasefire followed on April 8th, brokered by Pakistan. 2 weeks, extended indefinitely by Trump on April 21st. It held badly through the spring. Both sides violated it repeatedly. By July 9th, at a NATO summit in Turkey, Trump stood in front of cameras and said the Memorandum of Understanding is over. Just like that. 4 months of fragile diplomacy, gone in one sentence. And here's the detail I promised you. Back in February, less than 48 hours before the first strikes even began, 3 men sat in a room in Geneva, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and a third figure most people don't talk about, Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, brought in for what was supposed to be the final round of Omani-mediated talks. Witkoff would later say he sensed something was wrong in that room, that Araghchi seemed angry for another reason, that Iran was using enrichment as a smokescreen. Whatever happened in Geneva that week, the bombs fell 48 hours later. Some officials believe Trump had already made his decision before that meeting even started. If that's true, the entire Geneva session was theater. Diplomacy as cover, not diplomacy as intent. So what does Trump actually want right now? Strip away the noise. His demands, as of this week, center on one number, 440 kilograms. That's the stockpile of uranium enriched to near weapons grade levels sitting inside Iran, according to Arms Control Association reporting. Trump wants it destroyed, not stored, not blended down the way Araghchi has suggested Iran previously offered. And in a shift that stunned even his own negotiating team, Trump floated, relaxing his original demand, permanent total elimination of enrichment, to something narrower, a 20-year suspension. His own words, 20 years is enough, but the level of guarantee from them is not enough. Translation, he's willing to bend on time, but not on proof. He wants it in writing, notarized, verifiable. Not another verbal assurance that evaporates the moment cameras turn off, but here's the catch. Iran has 3 conditions of its own, laid out by President Pezeshkian months ago and never abandoned. 1, firm guarantees against future aggression, meaning a legal promise the U.S. and Israel won't strike again, ever, under any pretext. 2, recognition of Iran's legitimate rights, diplomatic language for the right to enrich uranium at all, which Iran treats as a sovereignty issue under Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. 3, reparations, actual payment for actual damage before Tehran signs anything. And there's a 4th demand that's quietly become the real sticking point. Iran wants to establish a new regime governing the Strait of Hormuz itself, including transit charges on ships passing through. Oman, which has managed strait access diplomatically for years, opposes this outright. The United States calls it unacceptable. Picture it. Iran wants to install a toll booth on one of the fifth of the planet's oil supply and expects the U.S. Navy to just let ships pay up. Now here's where it gets dangerous. Regional mediators, Pakistan, Qatar, Oman, working in parallel, floated a new proposal this week. A 10-day ceasefire. Just 10 days. Enough to pull both sides back from the edge and restart real talks. ING strategists Warren Patterson and Ewa Manthe called it exactly what it is. This won't be an easy task. Large divisions remain between the US and Iran. And they're right, because at the exact moment mediators were pitching de-escalation, Trump was threatening to make Iran pay many times over for dead American soldiers. That's the pivot. That's the catch nobody wants to say out loud. There is no unified American position, and there is no unified Iranian position. On the American side, you have Trump wanting a deal, a signed, legacy-defining deal, something he can point to as the moment he finished what 4 previous presidents couldn't. But Israeli hardliners fought alongside the U.S. back in February and never joined the Pakistan-mediated talks directly. They stayed outside the room, watching. To them, any partial agreement that leaves Iran with even a fraction of its enrichment infrastructure intact isn't diplomacy. It's a ticking time bomb with someone else's finger on the detonator. Prime Minister Netanyahu's government has signaled repeatedly through back channels that a 20-year suspension is not the same thing as zero. 20 years to Jerusalem is just a delay dressed up as a solution. On the Iranian side, you have IRGC and President Pezeshkian trying to negotiate an actual exit from this war, one that keeps the regime standing and the economy breathing. But sitting in the same government, wielding real institutional power, is Ali Shamkhani, an advisor to the Supreme Leader's office, who threatens publicly that any military action from the United States will see Iran targeting the U.S., Israel, and those who support it. That's not Tehran speaking with one voice. That's the IRGC's hardliners drawing a red line the diplomats can't uncross. And remember, this is the same apparatus that just watched its own supreme leader die in an American airstrike. Grief and vengeance are steering half of Iran's decision-making right now, and grief doesn't sign memorandums, it retaliates. Now, the ships, the actual hardware sitting in these waters right now. Forget what you've heard about the USS Gerald R. Ford steaming toward the Gulf. As of July the 20th, Ford is sitting in dry dock at Norfolk Naval Shipyard, undergoing planned maintenance after an 11-month deployment. She's not coming. The real muscle right now is the USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group, paired with an amphibious ready group built around USS Boxer, plus roughly 14 guided missile destroyers running what the Pentagon is calling Blockade 2.0, a renewed naval blockade of Iranian ports launched the moment the April ceasefire collapsed. F-A-18 Super Hornets off the Bush are flying with AIM-9X air-to-air missiles, GBU-31 and GBU-54 precision-guided bombs. This is the strike package hitting Iranian air defense and coastal radar sites, including this week the very equipment on Qeshm Island that opened this story. Here's the geopolitical domino effect nobody's modeling out loud. If Iran fully closes the Strait of Hormuz, not the harassment and mining we've seen, but a full sustained shutdown, a fifth of the world's daily oil supply stops moving overnight. Energy analysts have already sketched the math. Oil spiking well past $200 a barrel within days, gas prices at American pumps jumping past $8, $9 a gallon inside 2 weeks, and global shipping insurance rates going vertical as war risk premiums get slapped on every tanker in the region. Airlines reroute, container. Ships idle outside the Gulf rather than risk the transit. Every economy that runs on that oil, Japan, South Korea, most of Europe, India, starts rationing before the first month is even over. We're already seeing the early tremors. The Iran-backed Houthis just declared their own blockade on Saudi shipping. On the second front, completely separate from the U.S.-Iran standoff, opening up almost overnight. Air France has already suspended flights to Riyadh and Dubai. Beirut flights are suspended until August 2nd. Insurers in London are quietly rewriting Gulf transit policies this week before a single new incident even happens, because premiums are cheaper to raise now than to explain later. This isn't contained, it's spreading sideways. One flight suspension and one rerouted tanker at a time, and almost nobody outside the shipping and insurance industries is watching it happen. And now, the third power. Nobody wants to admit is calling shots from the sidelines. Russia and China. Twice now, in April, and again as recently as this month, Beijing and Moscow have jointly vetoed United Nations Security Council resolutions demanding Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Publicly, China's position is calculated neutrality. Foreign Minister Wang Yi telling his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov that the fundamental way to resolve navigation issues is to achieve a ceasefire as soon as possible. Privately, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned 9 China-based entities this month for funneling money and weapons components to the IRGC. China needs Hormuz open. A quarter of its energy runs through that water. But it's cushioned by discounted Iranian and Russian crude and massive strategic reserves, buying Beijing time to play mediator without ever fully breaking from Tehran. Russia, meanwhile, joined Iran and China in the IRGC Maritime Security Belt 2026. Naval drills inside the strait itself earlier this year, a not-so-subtle signal that if the U.S. Navy wants full control of that waterway, it won't be the only serious military presence there. But here's the second catch, and it's the one that should worry you most. IRGC flew to Beijing in May, meeting Wang Yi just 1 week before Trump's own summit with Xi Jinping. The draft resolution on the table, the one meant to guarantee shipping safety, has reportedly been rewritten multiple times specifically to win Russian and Chinese sign-off, which means the actual endgame in the Persian Gulf isn't just being negotiated between Washington and Tehran anymore. It's being shaped quietly, by Beijing's calculus and Moscow's leverage, 2 capitals that gain enormously from a permanently distracted, permanently bleeding United States military. So where does this leave us? 5 days out from today? The 10-day ceasefire proposal from Pakistan, Qatar, and Oman is sitting on 2 desks right now. One in the Situation Room, one in whatever bunker Mojtaba's Khamenei is currently occupying. If both sides sign, even provisionally, expect a partial reopening of shipping lanes within 72 hours, a pause in strikes on Qeshm and the surrounding radar network, and Witkoff and IRGC, possibly with Kushner again in the room, reconvening for technical talks within the week. That's option 1. Peace, fragile and temporary but real. Option 2, Iran's hardliners win the internal argument. Another American service member dies. Trump makes good on many times over. Strikes escalate beyond Qeshm to Kharg Island itself. Iran's actual oil export lifeline, 90% of its crude revenue running through one facility. Satellite imagery already shows Iran has been quietly reinforcing Kharg since March. Anti-ship missiles, drones, sea mines. Exactly the kind of buildup you make when you expect someone to come for it. If Kharg goes dark, Iran has almost nothing left to lose economically, and every back channel, Beijing, Moscow, Doha, becomes irrelevant overnight because a regime with nothing left to protect has no reason left to negotiate. Watch 3 things over the next 72 hours. Watch whether Witkoff and IRGC actually get back in a room together, with or without Kushner. Watch whether the Bush Carrier Strike Group pulls back from the blockade line or pushes forward on it. And watch Kharg Island specifically, because everyone studying this conflict agrees on one thing. Kharg, not Qeshm, is the line that turns a limited war into an unlimited one. 5 days, 2 paths, a ceasefire memo waiting for a signature, or a war that stops distinguishing between radar sites and refineries. Right now, tonight, nobody in Washington, Tehran, Beijing, or Moscow can tell you which one wins. That's not speculation. That's just where we are.